America's 35th president. In The Men Who Killed Kennedy, the story continues. Peter Sissons, in a studio discussion, assesses the questions and controversy that were raised in the original
Washington, as the 25th anniversary approaches on November the 22nd of the assassination of President Kennedy. An avalanche of books, articles and films have been produced in an endless re-examination of the murder that shook the world. In England, 3 weeks ago, Central Independent Television broadcast The Men Who Killed Kennedy and named 3 alleged killers.
It is now 25 years since the assassination of President Kennedy. Tonight at 9 on ITV, Viewpoint 88 will prove conclusively that Lee Harvey Oswald was not the lone assassin. Will for the first time identify the men who killed Kennedy, and will consequently uncover a 25-year cover-up.
That film caused a storm of controversy, but it did end with a specific undertaking that a subsequent programme would deal with the conclusions it came to. This is our task tonight. The controversy is twofold. Firstly, was the film journalistically flawed? Should not the accused have had a chance to answer the charges? The second broad criticism concerns other specific revelations. The man who was President Kennedy's press secretary, Pierre Salinger, writing in the International Herald Tribune, dismissed the film as one of many amateurish investigations built on largely unsubstantiated information. Well, we'll be looking at that, but whether you saw the film or not, there are powerful, broader issues raised, which I'll be discussing with 5 people who have looked at the Kennedy assassination from many different perspectives. Howard Willins was part of the Warren Commission, the first official investigation into the assassination in 1963. Robert Groden, whose analysis of the famous footage we've just seen gave an impetus to reopen inquiries into the assassination. Professor Robert Blakey, senior legal advisor to what became the second and last official inquiry into the assassination in 1979. James Duffy, a lawyer at the New York Criminal Bar who spent the last 8 years re-examining all the official evidence. And Nigel Turner, director and producer of the film The Men Who Killed Kennedy. Before we hear from the panelists about some of the questions surrounding the Kennedy assassination, let's look at some of the events of the last 2 weeks since the film was aired. The film received a large audience in both Britain and France. Both Nigel Turner and the American writer Steve Revell, who worked together on the film, stated that 2 of the 3 alleged killers are still free. They named these 3 men, all French citizens: Lucien Sarti, who died in Mexico in 1972, Roger Baccognani, who is believed to be in South America, and Saver Pironti, who is living in Marseille.
The men who murdered the President of the United States have been named by witnesses who even the government considers are credible. They live within walking distance of where I'm standing. One, Saver Pironti, spends his afternoons in a bar over here by the public gardens, and the other, Roger Baccognani, keeps an apartment within walking distance of here, just a few blocks away.
These allegations were quickly followed by press reports asking if the 3 men named really were Kennedy's assassins, and if so, why weren't they told of the accusations that were going to be made about them before the film was shown? Revell's original informant was Christian David, now awaiting trial in Paris for murder. David saw the program from his prison cell and has since instructed his lawyer to refute the charges.
Je n'ai jamais donné aucune information sur l'affaire Kennedy. En anglais, I hereby ask you to deny and file legal action against Steve Revell. This man is a liar. I never gave any information about the Kennedy assassination. That's the beginning of the letter.
In the last 10 days, we've been to France to hear firsthand from one of the accused, Saver Pironti, and from others connected in the story.
Je rentre chez moi.
I go home, my wife and child are watching the local news, and suddenly, just like that, the Kennedy affair. The assassin of President Kennedy is Saver Pironti. Well then, when they gave my name, my daughter, my wife, well, total chaos.
It was we who told Mr. Pironti that in a book and in an English television program, he was being accused of being one of the accomplices or one of the perpetrators of the Kennedy assassination. I called Pironti to tell him that he had been implicated in this affair.
The man who came to my office on Tuesday, 25th October, was terrified, in a panic. He showed me the evening paper and said, "What's happening to me? What is happening to me?" And immediately he added, "My children." You must know that one of his daughters is now in England. He said it, he explained that to find yourself suddenly in the shoes of one of the greatest criminals of all time, for that is what it amounts to have killed President Kennedy, is to carry the label of one of the greatest criminals ever. It is a delicate situation.
When was the first time you were told that there was an inquiry going on into the assassination of Kennedy, involving you and your family? When was it?
Vous et votre famille. C'était quand que...
Well, let me try to remember, because it all happened so fast. I was informed for the first time in the morning, no.
It was Tuesday, October 25th.
Tuesday, October 25th, in the morning. Right, I pick up the newspaper, and in the paper I see the name of a friend of mine who is dead, who died in Mexico, the murderer of President Kennedy.
The friend was Lucien Sarti. His family refused to be filmed. As these documents show, Sarti had lost an eye in 1962 and was still receiving a disability allowance 2 years later.
Did anyone, Steve Rivell or any others, Americans, try to contact you before the film was shown?
Absolutely no one. Absolutely no one. In any case, if they had tried to contact me at any time, I would have put a stop to it at once, because it couldn't have happened. It would have been allowed to produce either a film or a book. I would have told them that it was not possible, that it was not possible, that I was in the army at the time and that my friends were in detention, in jail.
Tu peux voir ça juste pour 30 secondes, juste pour faire ce... Donc ça dit que...
So you were doing your military service at the time?
That's it, my military service.
And where were you during that week?
That week?
In 63.
Well, I was in Toulon, in a minesweeper.
On the 23rd of November?
No, we were on the land, then we were on the land. On the 23rd November, I remember as it were yesterday, because you know how events get mixed up with the time. I remember very well the assassination of Kennedy. On that day, we were on our barracks, and it was all like a bombshell, the assassination of Kennedy. I remember, it was during my rest. I was lying down, and suddenly on the radio, the assassination of President Kennedy.
We made inquiries with the naval authority, who, on the next day, the day of the publication of the Pironti interview, published a communique distributed by Agence France Presse and all the agencies, confirming that on the date Pironti was in fact on duty, that he was not on leave, and therefore his statements were accurate and confirmed by the ministry. We also had proof from the prison administration that Bocconiani was incarcerated at the Beaumet prison for burglary.
You have what, in your view, constitutes definitive proof that he was actually in prison in November 63?
Yes, I have incontrovertible proof. His trial at which he appeared as a prisoner. I have the relevant document, which I can show you, from which it is clear that Bocconiani appeared before the court as a prisoner. For if it had been otherwise, and he had not been in detention before the trial, he would have been phrased differently. But this is not the case. In this document, it is stated that he was a prisoner. Secondly, I have the order from the examining magistrate who passed the file onto the court on the 15th of November 1963. Furthermore, the document specified that the events which led to his arrest dated back to the 8th of September 1963. Thus, he was put in prison on the 9th or 10th September 1963, and from then until the 12th of December, he did not leave prison.
But you did specify that he was in prison.
There is absolutely no doubt. He was in prison. What's more, I saw him in prison myself.
When?
During all that period. I used to call him and see him at least once or twice a week.
Including the week of 22nd, 23rd of November?
Yes, definitely. You need to look it up in the prison register. You will see that he was in detention during all of that period. There can be no shadow of a doubt about it.
C'est absolument indiscutable. Et pour vous, juste encore une
And
fois,
just to
ça-
check once more, that constitutes irrefutable proof?
Indiscutable.
Irrefutable.
No doubt at all that he was in prison in Marseille?
Absolument aucun doute.
Absolutely no doubt about that fact. To have implicated Bokonani in this affair is fantasy of the highest order.
Au plus haut degré.
Je crois que c'est un directeur de la chaîne ITV.
I think it's one of the directors of ITV, one of the directors or one of the journalists who said
What?
who said that he tried to get in touch with me and then he was threatened. Now that, I just don't understand any of that.
Là, je comprends plus du tout. Hein.
Écoutez, la chose la plus élémentaire...
The most elementary thing, and you wouldn't be in my office today if it were not so, is to check the facts. You know, as they say, one of our Marseille newspapers carries the following dictum on its front page. Information is free. No, sorry, comment is free, but facts are sacred.
Moi, j'ai ma fille qui était...
I have a daughter who was an au pair in London, but she had to leave.
She had to leave?
No, she was an au pair. She had just arrived. She'd only been in London a fortnight. Well, she had to leave. You understand? I called her up in a hurry. Well, she had to move because it caused problem with the host family. Her father had become President Kennedy's assassin. You understand? They were employing the assassin's daughter. It was impossible.
Non, ça allait plus.
And what have been the effects on your family here in Marseille of the program? Can you sum it up for us?
Je peux pas vous les résumer.
I can't sum it up. It can't be summed up. You have to live through a thing like this. You know very well that with this kind of things, you have to live through it. It can't be summed up in a few words. It's always difficult. You know, I think there's a saying, lie, lie, and libel, some of it always sticks.
Nigel Turner, are you still standing by your allegations against Sarti, Boccagnani and Pironti?
Yes, we are.
You state categorically these were the men who shot the president.
We say in the film that until these men are brought into custody and questioned, only from their own lips will we know the full truth about this matter.
Now, that's not quite the same thing, is it, as saying they were the men who shot the president? You're now saying something different.
I'm quoting Steve Ravel very precisely.
I'm sure you must agree that to accuse someone of murder, you must start off with some cast-iron evidence. Have you got that evidence?
I think we have very strong evidence to support what has been said in the film. I'm shocked seeing the material just shown, because I think a wonderful, a glorious opportunity was lost to ask Pironti some really hard questions, not to deal with how he feels, this emotional reaction and how it's affected his family, because I think that is largely irrelevant in the context of the very large issue that we're talking about.
Well, hold on a second.
We believe that Pironti, Boccagnani and Lucien Sarti were the three assassins that killed the President of the United States. And I feel it's a great loss of a wonderful opportunity to have spoken to Pironti and asked him some really hard questions.
Well, you could always
I didn't see those.
You could always go back and talk to him again, of course. But let me put
well,
this to
I
you.
tried very hard indeed to speak
to
Pironti,
we'll come to that in a moment.
I was denied that opportunity.
We'll come to that in a moment, about how hard you tried. The fact of the matter is that these three men were fingered, were pointed out by two villains. Does the uncorroborated evidence of two villains amount to cast-iron evidence? Is it in fact worth anything?
Well, you say two villains. Christian David has spent a long time in jail, but even as his lawyer said in the film, he is a man who has a great deal of information and who is regarded by certain elements in the United States, and I think he's referring there to people in intelligence, that he has a great deal of knowledge also. As far as our other prime witness is concerned, Nicoli, he I think, is almost irrefutably the most cast-iron witness one could possibly have. And the reason why I say that is that Nicolai has been part of the United States Federal Witness Program for the last 16 years. And in that time, according to the authorities here in Washington, at the DEA, he has never given any false information. He has been responsible for putting a very large number of very important criminals behind bars. And he is the sort of person who, we are told, can be absolutely trusted. And as one DEA official said, if Nicolai says it, you can take it to the bank.
Well, did Michel Nicolai ever state that the three men you named killed the president?
He confirmed the essentials of what David had originally said.
Did he ever state, did he ever name those three men as being the men who killed the president? I put it to you that he did not.
As if you've looked carefully at the program, you will see in the program we say it was generally known amongst my circle in South America that it was these three men who killed the President of the United States.
Well, I have, as you have, the transcript of the whole of Steve Revel's interview with Michel Nicolai, in which I will quote, "Could you give us details of what was said in the bar?" says Revel. "No," says Nicolai, "there are no details. The question of the death of Kennedy came up in the conversation. We were talking, speculating about who could have killed him. But the way in which Sarti looked at the others and then they looked at each other, and that is what made me assume. There were no words." He names nobody. It was assumption. There were no words.
Not at all. If you look on further in that transcript, or indeed I would prefer you to look at the program itself.
I've seen it twice.
Right. Well then, I just suggest you look at it a third time.
Well,
because you will see it is said very clearly in that program that
he confirms
that it was known
what David said. But he doesn't name the names himself.
Forgive me, Peter. He confirms that it was known amongst his circle in South America that it was these three men who'd been involved in the assassination. He said, yes, it was known.
And his circle were basically a gang of villains.
Well, I think it's all villains together in a way, but I think Nicolai has certainly vindicated his reputation over the last 16 years. As far as the American government is concerned, he's put more people behind bars almost than any other member of the Federal Witness Program. He is a very credible witness. And I should mention one most important point. Nicolai has called us twice since the program has gone out to stand by what he says. He says, I wish to change nothing in my statement. These are the three men.
Why did you not check the allegations with the men and their lawyers, those that are still alive, Boccagnani and Pironti? Now, what did you do to check your story in the way that I think would have been regarded as good journalistic practice?
Steve Revel has, as our researcher and investigator on this issue, spent a long time, 4 years in fact, researching this particular subject. He failed to find Boccagnani because Boccagnani is a man who's been on the run for some time. Pironti has spent a long time in jail, and I think one should just set Pironti in context. He comes over as a rather sort of likable, affable, terribly wronged individual. The reality is that Pironti, along with the other two people, have spent a great part of their lives smuggling drugs. And one has got to bear in mind also that Pironti has spent 10 years in jail. He was in jail from 75 to 85. In fact, he was given a 15-year sentence. So that's the sort of scale of person we're talking about.
Nigel Turner, thank you very much. Now, I'd like to turn to the rest of our panel, if I may, to ask them for their general spot reaction to the Turner film, starting with Robert Blakey.
I thought it was journalistically unprofessional. I thought its presentation of the evidence was biased and slanted, and I thought it was, in substance, both misleading and inaccurate.
James Duffy?
Just as a lawyer, a trial lawyer, I didn't think the evidence hung together.
You couldn't make a case against Boccagnani and Pironti on the basis of what you saw?
I wouldn't want to try to earn a living doing it.
Robert Groden.
Of all the television shows I've seen since the time of the assassination, I have found none that I thought was as well done as this, as well researched, as fair and honest. When Nigel Turner first came to me, as a man who had absolutely no preconceived conclusions about the assassination, he went down for himself with no script, started speaking to the witnesses, not just on the issue that we've been discussing so far, But unfortunately, the rest of the show, which has basically gotten buried under this particular controversy.
Howard Willins, you were on the staff of the Warren Commission. You must get tired of these issues being raised, but what was your reaction to the film?
Well, Peter, until I saw this program, I thought I had lost my capacity to be surprised by the sensationalism that has followed the Kennedy assassination. This program did surprise me. It was nothing more than a rehash of allegations with respect to the assassination that had been treated by the Commission in the literature for 25 years. And the only new material here was the identification of these three hapless Corsicans, or villains as they seem to be referred to, that Mr. Turner seems to have identified as the assassins without one shred of physical evidence identifying them in any way with the events that took place in November of 1963.
Now, I want to, having got your general reaction to the film, and I will invite Nigel Turner to come back later on, to look at one or two of the principal features of the film, starting with the startling pictures, which were the work of this gentleman here, the enhanced Zapruder film, which appeared to prove conclusively that the president was killed by more than one bullet, and that the second one took out the front right of his head. The bullet which the thesis in the film charges came from behind the wall on the grassy knoll. Howard Willins, what's your reaction to seeing that picture?
Well, there's nothing on that issue that's new to the Warren Commission's investigation or the criticism of the Commission's work. There was overwhelming evidence discussed at length in the Commission's report with respect to the source of the shots, and particularly the wounds that killed the president. There is no reliable evidence, including the material in the program, that identifies or locates any other marksman on the premises, and the overwhelming physical and other evidence, including the ballistics examination of the bullets that did in fact injure the president, point conclusively to Lee Harvey Oswald as having been the assassin.
Robert Blakey.
And let me underline exactly what he said. We convened a panel of the top forensic pathologists in the country to study all of the physical evidence. And with one exception, the one that Mr. Turner presented on the TV without any context, unanimously agreed that there were two shots from behind that killed the president. There is simply no physical evidence to support the fact that he was shot from the front right, and this includes...
Well, we saw it happen on the film.
No, you think you saw it happen, but when it's carefully analyzed, for example, the X-rays of the president's skull, which were authenticated, they were not tampered with in any way by the dental records of the president of Massachusetts, clearly establishes the shot came from the back, the front, and out, and there is no responsible forensic pathologists that have looked at it, and we've had people from New York, from Dallas, from Chicago, from around the country that say two from behind, and people who say otherwise simply don't know what they're talking about.
Robert Groden.
The Warren Commission published 26 volumes and a report, over 10 million words. In all those 10 million words, they very carefully avoided ever mentioning even once the rearward motion of the president when he's struck. They never mentioned it once. They never looked at the autopsy photographs. They never presented them in evidence.
We looked at them.
I know you looked at them.
You were given the opportunity when you worked for us to look at them, and your positions were not established in the light of the testimony of the other photographic people and the autopsy people. You really ought not to continue to take this position when there is simply no evidence to support it.
James Duffy,
please let me answer that. Let me answer that. We have every single doctor, every nurse, every eyewitness in Dealey Plaza that describes the president's head wounds as having a massive exit wound in the rear of the head.
And as between photographs of his body and somebody's memory, as between which you can still go look at, as between somebody's memory and the X-rays, which shall we rely on? It's the physical evidence that continues to speak.
Professor Blakey, that is totally ridiculous. If you look at the evidence given by the doctors in Dallas on the day and their subsequent testimony.
Have you seen the autopsy photographs?
Can I just finish my point?
Have you seen the X-rays?
They all say,
have you studied our forensic pathology panel?
As Bob said
Why
in the
didn't
film,
you present on your program all of the forensic pathology people who were against WEC?
And you saw in the film Dr. McClellan make a very specific diagnosis of where that hole was in the back.
Let me ask you.
Are you saying Dr. McClellan is lying?
I'm saying he's mistaken. Let me ask you one hard question.
They weren't all mistaken.
They weren't all mistaken.
No. Why didn't you present on your television program the forensic pathologist other than WEC who squarely disagree with him? We presented WEC in a public testimony. Why didn't you also present the same kind of people we presented in a public testimony that said the man is irresponsible and wrong? Your program was biased because it did not present most views. You did not permit your viewers to judge. Yes, what you did is you led them to one conclusion.
Could you keep can't you say also that you were biased in your committee that sat for 2 years and spent $6 million of taxpayers' money?
First of all, it wasn't six, it was five, and you're wrong on that.
Are you actually saying to me that the doctors in Dallas were lying?
I'm saying they're wrong. There's a difference between being mistaken
not
and
all
being
of them,
wrong.
Bob. They couldn't all be
not
wrong.
all wrong.
Now, I think that you could certainly go on talking about this for a long time, but time is limited, however. I'd like to raise now another principal feature of the Turner film, which will have, again, astonished a number of people who are not well acquainted with the case, the Badgeman picture. Now, this picture, this Polaroid picture, which when enhanced, is seen to reveal shadowy figures, and the claim is made that it shows a man firing a gun from the grassy knoll. Howard Willens.
I don't see in that photograph what Mr. Turner and others seem to see in it. I am also persuaded by the eyewitness testimony at Dealey Plaza at the day of the event and the absolute lack of credible evidence that there was any person in a position to fire a rifle or any other weapon from the location where this badge man was apparently placed by the photograph. I also find it staggering to hear Mr. Turner and Mr. Grodin suggest there was a battery of marksmen firing away at the president on November 22, and wasn't one eyewitness who saw a rifle, there's not one cartridge shell, there's not one fragment of a bullet that comes from any gun other than Lee Harvey Oswald.
Well, he has a witness. He had the deaf-mute man who saw the man with the rifle walk away.
And he has other people who appeared out of nowhere after 25 years to change their stories, to create new stories, and one only has to sympathize with people who, after this passage of time, feel some compulsive need to come forward and create new allegations with respect to the report. And to suggest that the commission and its staff had any intentions other than to do a complete investigation to the best of their human ability, to reach sound conclusions and to report that to the Attorney General of the United States and the American public is, to me, a great calumny and insult to all of us associated with the report.
Excuse me, why do opinion polls show?
No, wait a second.
Why do opinion polls show that the American
He said the same thing not only about the Warren Commission, he said it about us. But for the fact that I am a public official, and therefore he is protected in this country, when he suggests that I cover it up, I would sue him for libel, because he is a liar. I was not biased, and I did not cover it up. I interrogated that man. I investigated his investigation, and it was fair, it was open, it was honest. For example, your photograph.
Yes.
We had the top people in the country look at that photograph.
The Badgeman photograph.
The Badgeman photograph, and they decided that you couldn't derive the kind of information that they now say they could get out of it.
What's your view on Badgeman, James Duffy?
This is central to my feeling that the whole film doesn't hang together as a piece of evidence. Basically, the thrust of the film makes Sartee Badgeman. Badgeman, according to the soldier who's in front of the fence, then comes in front of the fence, asks him if he was shooting film, and takes the film from him. We don't know that Sartee spoke English. We know he was French. We know, according to the film, that when they were picked up in Mexico at the border, they spoke with the Italian mafia figure in Italian. Here's a man who the soldier on the ground thinks is a Dallas police officer. No accent or anything.
So what point do you make about Badgeman?
Well, let me just finish. There's two others. More important. They identify 3 shooters and they put them all in a specific location. So who did the setup of Oswald in that theory in the book depository. That's another man can be traced back.
We did not put them in a specific location. We only put Badger in a specific location.
And how about the railroad worker that you put behind the fence, who then, according to the deaf-mute gentleman, takes the rifle, puts it in a box, and walks away with it? There's somebody can be traced back. So the whole thing doesn't hang together as a piece of evidence as far as I'm concerned.
Well, think about another one.
A very brief word on Badgeman.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's the same point. It's not credible. If, in fact, this conspiracy killed Oswald in a prison or in a jail within 48 hours of the assassination, do you really believe they would have left these three Frenchmen alive for this period of time?
Well, you've brought us...
It lacks verisimilitude.
Yes, you brought us on to the other central allegation in Nigel Turner's film, that there was a massive cover-up which began with the FBI.
And includes Howard Willans and includes me.
So, what's your reaction to that allegation?
He's a liar. I covered nothing up, and no evidence that I uncovered in a full investigation of what he did indicates that their investigation was anything other than fair and honest. And if you suggest that he participated in a cover-up, you are a liar.
Nigel Turner.
Wait a minute, wait.
Yes, those are heavy words to use.
Nigel Turner.
Yes, I'm not saying that and I think the film makes this clear, I'm not saying the Warren Commission deliberately covered up. I think the Warren Commission...
That's certainly the impression of the film.
I think, and there are certainly people who think that. I
but that's certainly the
impression
impression you left in the film, and you didn't give him a chance to answer.
But what I think it is important to say is that the Warren Commission had all sorts of constraints laid upon their efforts. And those constraints, at the end of the day, led to a flawed report.
Well, Howard Willans can answer that.
Even certain councillors on the report realise that themselves, and have said it since.
Would you deal with
they
that
were
point,
not
Howard
happy
Willans?
with the final report.
Would you deal with that point?
Certainly. I mean, the Warren Commission report was a human effort, and to that extent a flawed one. There were no constraints that operated upon us that in any way persuaded or influenced any member of the staff to reach a conclusion other than what was justified by the facts. There simply was no scheme or sense of authority that would have been powerful enough to depress or eliminate the integrity of a widely disparate and competent group of people of all ages and backgrounds.
Unless it was a massive conspiracy.
Who came to the commission to do what they thought was a job in the public service and to do it to the best of their ability. There are members of the staff, and indeed maybe the commission, who wish we had pursued particular lines of investigation in a different way or over more time. There's no question but that there was a time at which the investigation had to be brought to conclusion, just as there was in the case of Professor Blakey's investigation that we discussed earlier. We could not continue the investigation for the 25 years since the assassination, where there still seemed to be new participants in the effort to develop new conspiracy theories.
How do you account for the fact that opinion polls appear to show that the American public doesn't believe the Warren Commission on balance and would welcome a new inquiry? The Warren Commission does not carry widespread public support.
I think that is right. I think that is probably true in Europe as well, where the very first conspiracy theories were aired with respect to the Kennedy assassination. There seems to be a deep-seated human need to look for some explanation of historic events of this tragedy, and people are essentially dissatisfied with the explanations that have been brought to the public domain.
Robert Groden, do you think that there was a massive conspiracy, one which we still will never know the details of?
I believe that there were probably two conspiracies. One to kill the president, which I think has been made several times through the years. But possibly unrelated to the initial conspiracy, there certainly was one to cover up for whatever reason. I sat quietly by a moment ago and heard the Warren Commission described as an honest and fair body. The Warren Commission's version, not their version, their attempt was simply not to find who killed President Kennedy. That wasn't even their mandate. Their mandate was to stop the rumors of conspiracy.
Do you think there should be a new inquiry?
I think there should be. I think there should be a special prosecutor, and I think that that certainly both sides of the issue should be represented.
James Duffy,
Professor Blakey's, one thing that hasn't really been presented is that Professor Blakey's HSCA investigation did indicate conspiracy, or the probability, a great probability of conspiracy, and I agree with that.
Yeah,
the Warren Commission was...
It also indicated that his investigation was conducted with integrity.
I take great issue with that, Bob.
James Duffy, are you a conspiracy man?
What you do, Bob, is you take whichever one that fits your bias.
I do not.
James Duffy,
Yes.
are you a conspiracy man who wants a new inquiry?
Absolutely. To go looking around the world for people who shot the president, when you have the subject, Oswald, who either was involved or somebody went to a great deal of trouble to make him appear involved, he is the way you trace back.
Nigel Turner, do you think you've made the case for a new inquiry, or do you rest your case with your film?
I would like the film to speak for itself.
That's all we have time for. We've had a fascinating discussion, but perhaps it can never lead to a conclusion, only to another question. Will we ever really know the truth? Can we ever know for sure who killed John Kennedy?
On Channel 4 now, Lou Grant is having a blackout. On Granada after